They buried me on a Wednesday. Rain dripped from black umbrellas. My daughter wept loud enough for the neighbors to hear. My grandson stood beside her, whispering about the will. I remember every word, because I was watching from the woods behind the cemetery fence, alive and very much aware that my own family had just faked my death. That's how my story begins. Not with a death, but with a betrayal. And not the quiet kind that slips into your life. The kind that looks you straight in the eye, says we love you, Dad, and then forges your signature on a life insurance policy. I'm Tom, 73 years old, retired mechanic, widower, father of 2, grandfather of 4, and apparently the perfect man to kill on paper. It started 2 months before that funeral. I'd been living in my daughter Ruth's house since my hip surgery. She and her husband Mark had insisted, "You'll be safer here, Dad. No need to live alone out in that old cabin." Maybe I should have known then. Maybe I should have seen the way Mark's smile never reached his eyes, the way my grandsons went quiet every time I mentioned checking the mailbox myself. They kept me comfortable, too comfortable. Meals on time, pain pills by the clock, the TV remote always ready. I thought it was kindness. It was calculation. One night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. My room was just down the hall, door cracked open for air. Ruth's voice, sharp, urgent. "He already signed the papers, Mark. We just need the doctor's note. Once the insurance clears, we can list the cabin." Mark whispered back, "You sure he doesn't suspect?" "Dad, he barely remembers what day it is." I almost laughed in the dark. Barely remembers. I remembered every screw and bolt I'd ever turned in 40 years at the workshop. Remembered the sound of my wife's laugh when she was still alive. Remembered every sacrifice I made for the same daughter who now planned my disappearance. That night, I didn't sleep. I pretended to, though it was safer that way. In the morning, Ruth brought me coffee, all sweet smiles. I noticed the new medicine bottle beside it. Pain relief. Take 1 daily. The pills looked different, smaller, bitter smell. I pocketed one when she wasn't looking. 3 days later, I took it to Dr. Newman, my old friend from the plant. He tested it quietly, after hours. When he called me that night, his voice trembled. "Tom, that pill's not what the label says. It's a sedative, strong dose. Taken daily, it would keep you groggy, confused. Over time, it would make me look like I'm dying," I finished for him. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That's when I knew I had to vanish before they finished the job. The next morning, I pretended to take my pills, pretended to nap, pretended to be the weak old man they wanted me to be. Meanwhile, I hid my truck keys in my sock drawer and packed a small bag, papers, phone, the box of my late wife's letters, and, most importantly, the deed to my cabin. By the time Ruth came home from work, I was already gone. I drove through the back roads until I reached the cabin by the lake, the one they thought I'd forgotten about. It smelled of pine and old dust, but it was mine. I sat there all night, lights off, watching rain blur the reflection of the porch lamp in the water. The next day, I opened the local paper online. Headline, "Local man dies peacefully at 73. My photo, my name, my obituary written by my daughter. She was crying when she wrote it, the article said. Tom was a beloved father, known for his kindness and devotion to family. I laughed until my throat hurt. They'd done it, forged the medical certificate, declared me dead, arranged a small funeral. Insurance would come next. $500,000 in life coverage. The house, the car, my savings. All neatly handed to Ruth and Mark. I should have called the police right then. But I wanted more than justice. I wanted truth, to know just how deep their betrayal went. So I waited. That week, I watched from the woods as the black car pulled up to the cemetery. Mark held an umbrella for Ruth, her shoulders shaking in pretend grief. My grandsons looked bored. When the priest said, "May his soul rest in peace," Mark leaned toward her and whispered something. She smiled. I clenched my fists in the rain. My wife, if she'd still been alive, would have fainted at the sight. When the last car drove away, I approached the grave. My name carved in fresh granite. Thomas Miller, 1952-2025, loving father and husband. The ground still soft, the flowers fake, plastic, like their love. I knelt beside the headstone and whispered, "You should have made sure I was dead before you buried me." That was the moment I stopped being a victim. Over the next few days, I built my plan. Step 1, collect evidence. Step 2, expose them. Step 3, make them feel the weight of what they'd done. I started with the insurance company. Pretending to be a clerk from the county office, I called and asked about the claim. Sure enough, Ruth Miller had already submitted the paperwork. Cause of death: cardiac failure following prolonged illness. Doctor's signature: Newman. Except, I knew he hadn't signed anything. Someone had forged it. I met Newman that night. He looked pale when I showed him the fake certificate. "I never wrote this," he said. "That's not even my handwriting." "I know," I told him quietly, "but now we both have proof." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend at the sheriff's department, retired now, but still sharp as a knife, Sam Walters. "Tom," he said when he heard my voice, "you sound like a ghost." "Maybe I am," I answered. "But before I disappear for good, I've got a few people who need to learn what resurrection feels like." Sam laughed, but there was steel in it. "You tell me where to meet you." The next morning, we met at a diner off Route 6. I laid out the forged papers, the pills, the obituary. Sam whistled low. "That's cold, even for family." "They wanted me gone," I said. "Now I'm going to give them exactly what they wanted, an inheritance they'll never forget." He looked at me carefully. "Tom, what are you planning?" I smiled. "A miracle." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun broke through clouds like a promise. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. And as I drove back toward the cabin, I passed Ruth's house. Through the window, I saw her laughing with Mark, wine glasses raised, my portrait still hanging over the mantel. My photo, the dead man smiling down on them. They had no idea that the dead man was watching back. That night, I lit a fire in the cabin and began writing letters, one to the insurance company, one to the sheriff, and one addressed to Ruth herself. She'd get it soon enough. But first, I had a funeral to crash. Because if they thought burying me was the end, they hadn't met the man who built engines out of scrap and survived 40 winters alone in this world. I was Tom Miller, and I'd just come back from the dead. The first time I saw my daughter after my funeral, she was laughing. That's what hurt the most. Not the forgery, not the betrayal, the laughter. They were hosting what they called a family memorial dinner 2 weeks after my burial. Ruth had decorated the house with candles and framed photos of me, a performance for the neighbors, no doubt. I watched it all from my truck parked across the street, engine off, lights dim. From the window, I could see my grandsons eating like wolves. Mark was pouring himself another glass of whiskey. Ruth stood at the head of the table, giving some teary speech about remembering Dad's spirit. I wanted to walk in and ask, "Which part of my spirit did you cash out first, sweetheart? The life insurance or the savings account?" But revenge is a patient man's game, and I'd had 73 years to learn patience. That night, I began to make myself visible again, one whisper at a time. I started small. I called Ruth's landline from a payphone outside the gas station, let it ring twice, then hung up. I did it again the next night, and the next. By the fourth night, Mark answered, shouting into the receiver, "Who the hell is this?" I hung up. Then I mailed them an envelope, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. Me sitting in front of my cabin, newspaper in hand. The date clearly visible, 2 weeks after my supposed death. The next morning, I imagined the look on Ruth's face when she opened it. I could almost hear her scream echoing through the kitchen. But this wasn't just about scaring them. It was about truth, and making sure every lie they built collapsed in daylight. Sam, my retired sheriff friend, had agreed to help me quietly. He'd contacted a former colleague still working in the county fraud unit. "Tom," he told me over the phone, "your daughter filed the life insurance claim 3 days after the funeral. Fast. Too fast." "She's in a hurry to bury me twice," I said. "We can't arrest her yet, but if we can prove she knew you were alive when she filed, it's insurance fraud." "I'll handle that proof," I said. The plan was simple. Let them expose themselves. The following week, Ruth and Mark drove up to my cabin. I watched from the trees as their SUV pulled into the gravel path. They didn't expect anyone to be there. After all, I was dead. Mark carried a crowbar. Ruth held a folder. She looked nervous. "Are you sure this is legal?" she asked. "Relax," Mark said. "It's our property now. We can sell it as soon as the deed transfers." He forced open the door, stepping inside like a man entering a tomb. What he didn't know was that I'd set up a small camera on the shelf by the old clock. Motion activated, cheap, but good enough. It caught every second. Mark breaking in, Ruth rummaging through my drawers, whispering, "Take the papers. Dad used to hide his savings somewhere." They found the empty safe. I'd moved the cash weeks ago. When they left, Mark kicked the table in frustration. "Damn old man probably buried it somewhere. He was always paranoid." Ruth snapped, "He's gone. Let it go. Once the check clears, we'll be done with him forever." I smiled in the dark as they drove away. That recording was worth more than any inheritance. The next day I met Sam at the diner again. "Got something for you," I said, sliding him the USB stick. He plugged it into his laptop, watched, and whistled. "That's felony-level stupidity," he muttered. "They just robbed a dead man's house." "Correction," I said. "They robbed a living one." He grinned. "You ready to go public?" "Not yet," I said. "Not until they've shown everyone who they really are." The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Ruth posted an announcement on social media, honoring Dad's memory with a charity fundraiser next weekend. A fundraiser for me. Using my name to collect donations. Tickets, $200 a plate. Proceeds to support heart disease research. The same disease they'd listed as my cause of death. Sam called that night. "You seeing this nonsense?" "I am," I said, "and I plan to attend." The night of the event, I dressed carefully. Clean flannel shirt, dark jacket, my old boots polished. I trimmed my beard, slicked back my gray hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time since this all began, I saw something fierce in my reflection. A ghost who wasn't ready to rest. The fundraiser was at the community hall. Candles, buffet tables, polite music. Ruth looked radiant in her black dress, shaking hands, pretending to be the noble daughter. "Dad would have been proud," she kept saying to every guest. I waited until halfway through the evening. The speeches had begun. Ruth stood at the microphone, voice trembling. "My father was a simple man, but his heart was enormous. We honor him tonight by pretending he's dead," I said from the back of the room. The microphone screeched. Heads turned. Ruth froze, mid-sentence. Her face went pale, then red, then ghost white again. "Dad," she whispered. Mark dropped his glass, shattering it across the floor. I walked forward slowly, each step echoing in the silent hall. The crowd parted like I was some miracle. Or a nightmare. "Evening, everyone," I said. "I hope the chicken's better than the lies I've been reading in the paper." Ruth's lips trembled. You're alive." "Always was," I said. "You just never bothered to check." The silence in that hall was heavy enough to break bones. Mark tried to recover first. This isn't funny, old man. You're supposed to be buried, I know. I read my own obituary." I pulled a folded newspaper from my jacket and set it on the podium. "Nice photo, by the way. You picked my good side." People started murmuring. Phones came out. Flashing cameras. Whispers spreading like wildfire. Ruth was shaking now. "Dad, I can explain." "I'd love to hear it," I said. "Maybe start with why your husband broke into my cabin, or why your doctor's signature ended up on a fake death certificate." Gasps rippled through the room. Mark took a step toward me. "You can't prove any of that." "Oh, I can," I said. "In fact, everyone here can watch it tomorrow morning on the sheriff department's website. Turns out, dead men still make good witnesses when they have a camera." Ruth covered her face. "Dad, please, not here." "Why not here?" "You made my death public. Seems fair, my life gets the same attention." The room was chaos now. Guests whispering, reporters snapping photos, Mark sweating bullets. I leaned closer to the microphone. "I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I spent my whole life fixing engines, and I learned one thing about machines. If one part goes bad, you either fix it or the whole thing burns. Consider this my repair work." I walked out before anyone could stop me. The murmurs followed me to the parking lot. Cameras flashed behind me, voices shouting, "Mr. Miller, where have you been?" I didn't answer. I just looked up at the night sky and took the deepest breath I'd taken in months. For the first time since they buried me, I felt alive, truly alive. But my work wasn't done. Ruth and Mark still had one thing left to lose: the money. And I intended to take it all back. Because if they wanted to play with the dead, they'd soon learn what it feels like when the dead start playing back. The morning after the fundraiser, my face was everywhere. "Dead man returns to expose his family's fraud." That was the headline splashed across the local news. Someone had filmed the entire scene: my entrance, Ruth's shock, Mark's panic. It went viral before sunrise. The whole town knew that the man they had mourned last month was not only alive, but furious. I sat at the diner with Sam, sipping coffee while the TV above the counter replayed the footage for the 5th time. The waitress refilled my cup, eyes wide. "Mr. Miller, I can't believe it. I was at your funeral." "So was I said dryly, and Sam almost choked on his toast. By noon, Ruth's fundraiser had been canceled. Donations frozen pending investigation. The sheriff's office confirmed they were reviewing the evidence I'd provided: the forged certificate, the video of the cabin break-in, the insurance claim filed in record time. But there was something the law couldn't do for me: make them feel it, the humiliation, the betrayal, the nights I lay awake wondering if the coffee they served me was laced with poison. That I'd handle myself. So I called Mark. He didn't answer the first 2 times, but on the 3rd ring, his voice burst through, furious, panicked. "Where the hell are you, old man?" I smiled. "You always were polite, Mark. How's the wife?" "You think this is funny? You've ruined us." "No, son, you ruined yourself. I'm just the man who woke up to watch it happen." He started shouting, cursing, but I hung up. I'd heard enough from him to know fear had set in. That's the thing about people like Mark. Courage evaporates the moment they're not in control. Later that afternoon, I drove out to my lawyer's office, an old friend named Greg Hartley, who'd handled my wife's estate years ago. When I walked in, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Tom, they said you were—" "Yeah, I noticed," I interrupted. "Got a few papers to sign." I pulled the folder from my jacket. Inside was my original will, the one Ruth and Mark thought they had already rewritten in their favor. I'd drafted a new version the night before. Greg scanned it, eyebrows rising. "You're leaving everything to a foundation?" "Not just any foundation," I said. "The Eleanor Fund, named after my wife. For elderly folks who have been abandoned or mistreated by their own families." He smiled slowly. "That's poetic." "Justice usually is," I said. By evening, it was official. My savings, the house, the land, all transferred out of my name into the foundation's control. Ruth and Mark would get nothing. But I wasn't finished yet. 2 days later, the sheriff's department held a press conference. Sam's old friend, Captain Reyes, stood at the podium, reading from a prepared statement. "An investigation into the fraudulent insurance claim filed under the name of Thomas Miller has resulted in the arrest of 2 suspects, Ruth Miller and Mark Peterson." I was watching live on TV when they showed the footage, my daughter, pale and trembling, being led into a police cruiser. Mark tried to shield his face from the cameras. The same neighbors who had attended my funeral now stood on the sidewalk, whispering. Some crossed themselves, others just stared. My heart should have felt lighter, but it didn't. Not yet. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset over the lake. The cabin smelled of smoke and pine, just like it did when Eleanor was alive. I could almost hear her voice teasing me. "You always said you wanted peace and quiet, Tom. Well, you got it. But peace didn't come easy when the people you loved had tried to erase you." At midnight, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered cautiously. "Dad?" Ruth's voice, small, shaking. "They let me make one call. Please listen. I didn't mean for it to go this far." My throat tightened. "You forged my death certificate, Ruth. You drugged me." "How far did you think it was supposed to go?" "It was Mark's idea. He said we'd pay the bills, that you'd be fine, that I'd be dead," I snapped. The silence that followed felt like the kind that comes after lightning strikes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted to keep the house. I didn't think—" "No," I said quietly. "You didn't. You never thought about anything but yourself. Dad, please, I'm your daughter. Not anymore, I said. My daughter died the day she buried me. I hung up before she could answer. Then I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone like it might start bleeding. The next morning, I drove into town to buy groceries. People stared as I walked down Main Street. Some smiled awkwardly, some looked away. It's not every day you see a man who's been resurrected. At the register, the clerk, a young kid with nervous eyes, handed me my change. "Mr. Miller," he said, "my grandpa says you're a legend." "Tell him legends are just old men who got tired of dying," I said, and walked out. A week passed. The story spread beyond our small town. TV stations, online tabloids, even a documentary crew called me for interviews. I turned them all down. The truth didn't need headlines. It needed silence to heal. Then one evening, as I sat by the lake with a cup of coffee, Sam pulled up in his truck. He got out slowly, same way he always did when he had heavy news. "They've confessed," he said. I nodded. "Both of them?" "Yep." "Ruth broke first," said Mark, pressured her. "Insurance companies pressing charges, but they might offer a deal if she cooperates." I stared at the water. "Let her cooperate?" "She's already lost more than prison could take." He hesitated. "You sure you don't want restitution? You could claim the payout, the damages." "No," I said. "Let the money go to the foundation. Maybe some other old fool will be saved before his own family buries him." Sam sighed. "You always were a stubborn bastard." "Maybe that's what kept me alive." He chuckled, climbed back into his truck, and left me with the sound of crickets and wind. When the stars came out, I walked down to the edge of the lake. The water was still, reflecting the cabin lights like tiny ghosts. I thought about Eleanor, about Ruth as a little girl chasing frogs in the same water, about the man I used to be before greed turned my family into strangers. I whispered, "You can rest now, Ellie. The truth's out." And for the first time since the day they buried me, I finally felt the weight lift. But as I turned to go back inside, I noticed headlights in the distance, a car pulling up the gravel road. It stopped halfway, engine idling. The door opened. Someone stepped out. A small figure, clutching something in their hands. It was my youngest grandson, Danny, maybe 15. Face pale, eyes wide. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "Mom told me you were gone, but I saw the news. I didn't believe her." My heart trembled. "You shouldn't be here, son." "I had to come," he said. He held out a folded piece of paper. "She told me to give you this." He handed it to me. A letter, Ruth's handwriting shaking across the page. I hesitated, then unfolded it. "Dad, if you ever read this, I want you to know I loved you. I lost my way, but I never stopped loving you. I hope someday you can forgive me, not for what I did, but for forgetting who you were." The paper blurred as tears filled my eyes. Danny looked at me nervously. "She said to tell you she's sorry." I folded the letter carefully, pressing it against my chest. "Thank you, son. You tell her I got the message." He nodded, then glanced toward the cabin. "Can I come in for a bit? Mom said you make the best cocoa." I smiled, the first real smile in months. "Sure thing, kid. Cocoa's always better shared with family, the ones who remember you're still breathing." As we walked back toward the cabin, I felt something warm flicker inside me. Not revenge, not victory, but something quieter. Hope. Because maybe, just maybe, the dead don't rise for vengeance alone. Sometimes they come back to teach the living how to live again. Danny stayed with me that night. He sat cross-legged by the fire, drinking cocoa out of an old chipped mug, eyes darting around the cabin like he was seeing the past alive again. The walls were lined with framed photos, Eleanor holding baby Ruth, fishing trips, birthdays, Christmas mornings, moments my daughter had once cherished, now just shadows of what we'd lost. "Mom said you were angry," Danny said quietly, "that you might not want to see any of us." "I was," I admitted. "Still am sometimes. Anger doesn't disappear just because the truth comes out. It just cools into something heavier." He looked down at his mug. "She's not doing well in there." He didn't need to explain what "there" meant. The county jail had Ruth for now, waiting for trial. Mark was in the state facility, charged with multiple counts of fraud and falsifying documents. The whole town knew every detail. Small towns always do. Danny hesitated before speaking again. She told me to say you should keep the cabin, that she doesn't want anything anymore. I gave a small laugh. That's good because she's not getting it. He smiled, but it was a sad smile, one that didn't belong on a boy his age. I watched him for a moment, how his fingers traced the rim of his mug, how his shoulders slumped. I'd seen that same look once, in the mirror, the day I realized my own father would never forgive me for leaving home at 18. The weight of family mistakes runs deep in our bloodlines. You don't have to carry what your mother did, Danny, I said. That's her sin, not yours. She's still my mom. I know, I said softly. And I'm still her father. That's what makes it hurt so damn much. He stayed the night in the guest room, the one that used to smell of pine soap and Eleanor's dried lavender. I didn't sleep much. I sat by the fire long after the flames turned to embers, the letter from Ruth folded tight in my hand. By dawn, the first light spilled through the window, pale gold against the lake. Danny was still asleep, curled up under the quilt Eleanor made years ago. For the first time in months, the cabin didn't feel empty. That afternoon, Sam stopped by again. He stepped inside, nodding toward the boy. Didn't expect to see company. My grandson, I said quietly. Sam smiled. He's got your stubborn eyes. Poor kid, I muttered, but I smiled too. Sam took a seat, lowering his voice. I thought you should know. Ruth's lawyer called the department. There's been a development. My chest tightened. What kind of development? She's making a full confession. Wants to plead guilty. Says she's got something else to tell you, though. Something she didn't mention before. My heart slowed. She said that? She did. Said it's about the insurance, about someone else involved. I stared into the fire. I thought I'd heard every lie already. Apparently not. That evening I called the jail. The guard told me she'd requested a visit. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., he said. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I put on my cleanest shirt and drove to the county detention center. The drive felt longer than it was, every mile filled with ghosts. When I walked into the visiting room, Ruth was already there, pale, tired, her hair pulled back. She looked older than she should have, like guilt had aged her faster than time ever could. Dad, she whispered when she saw me. I didn't sit right away. Just looked at her, searching for the little girl I used to push on the tire swing out back. The one who used to say, "Don't let go, Daddy." Finally, I sat. You said you had something to tell me. She nodded, hands trembling on the table. I didn't want to at first, because I thought you'd hate me even more. But you deserve the truth. I waited. It wasn't just Mark, she said. The idea came from someone else, someone we owed money to. My stomach tightened. Who? His name's Cole Madsen. Mark met him through work. He helped forge the documents. He was supposed to get a cut from the insurance money once it cleared. But when the police came, he vanished. I clenched my fists. You're telling me there's still another man walking free who tried to bury me alive? She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I swear I didn't want it to happen this way. Mark said it was only temporary, that we'd fake it and you'd stay somewhere quiet until the money came through. He said you'd be fine. Fine? I snapped. You left me drugged and alone. You buried me with lies. The guard shot me a look, and I forced myself to lower my voice. Ruth, you made choices, I said. You always did, and you chose greed over blood. She didn't argue, just whispered, I know, and I'll pay for it. But if this man comes for you, promise me you'll be careful. I didn't promise. I just stood up and walked away. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit me hard. Cole Madsen. The name felt like a spark in my chest. Whoever he was still out there. And if he thought the old man he buried would stay quiet, he was about to learn otherwise. That night, Danny asked why I looked so tense. I didn't tell him everything, just said, someone unfinished came back into the picture. Like a ghost? He asked. Something like that, I said. Before bed, I checked the locks twice and moved the hunting rifle from the closet to the hall. Not because I wanted trouble, but because I knew how trouble tends to find you when you least expect it. Outside, the woods were silent, but silence in the forest isn't peace. It's waiting. And somewhere out there, I could almost feel eyes watching. The first thing I noticed the next morning was the boot prints. 2 sets of them, deep in the mud outside the cabin door. Fresh. The kind of prints that don't belong to hikers or hunters. They were deliberate, careful. I stood on the porch in my robe, coffee steaming in my hand, staring at the path that led down toward the lake. The fog was thick, moving like smoke. Somewhere beneath it, something had changed. "Grandpa?" Danny's sleepy voice came from the doorway. "Stay inside, kid," I said quietly. I followed the prints a few yards until they disappeared near the tree line. Whoever had been here knew how to move light, how to vanish. My gut told me it wasn't a random visitor. It was someone checking to see if the old ghost really lived here. Back inside, Danny watched me pace the room. "You think it's that man Mom talked about?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, Cole Madsen." I hadn't told him much, just that someone dangerous might come around asking questions. Danny was sharper than most grown men. He understood what that meant. He bit his lip. "Do you think he'll hurt us?" "Not if I get to him first," I said. I made a few calls that afternoon. Sam was the first. "You were right," I said. "We've got company." He didn't hesitate. "Want me to send a patrol?" "No," I said. "If this guy's watching, I don't want him spooked. Let him think I'm still just some old man playing hermit." Next, I called Dr. Newman, the man whose name had been forged on my death certificate. "You ever heard of a Cole Madsen?" He hesitated. "The name sounds familiar. Wait, yes, I remember Mark mentioning him once during an appointment. Said he was in consulting. The kind of man who wears expensive shoes and no conscience." That checked out. By evening, I'd found his name online. Cole Madsen, 42, financial advisor, currently under investigation for multiple fraud cases in 2 counties. No address, no office, but plenty of rumors. Debt collection scams, forged insurance documents, falsified medical notes. He'd made a career out of people like me. When the sun went down, I sat on the porch again, rifle across my knees, the way I used to when we had coyotes on the property. Danny stayed inside reading, though every few minutes I saw the curtain shift where he peeked through. The woods stayed quiet until near midnight. Then I heard it, the faint crunch of gravel under tires. Headlights flickered between the trees, a car slowing, then stopping just beyond the bend. I stood, heart thudding, listening. The door creaked open. A silhouette moved against the pale mist, tall, lean, deliberate. "Evening," I called out. My voice echoed across the water. The man stopped. "You Tom Miller?" "Depends who's asking." "Friend of your daughter's," he said. His voice was smooth, too calm. The kind of voice that's used to lying. I stepped closer, the rifle visible now. "You're late for the funeral?" He laughed softly. "Yeah, I heard you got a talent for avoiding those." He walked into the faint light from the porch. Tan jacket, slicked back hair, the smirk of a man who thought the world owed him something. Cole Madsen. "I just came to talk," he said. "I doubt that." "Ruth said you're stubborn, but smart." "I like smart. Makes business easier." He leaned against the railing, his eyes scanning the cabin behind me. "Cute place. Shame if it went up in flames, though." That was enough. I lifted the rifle slightly. "You so much as breathe wrong, I'll send you to meet whatever devils you work for." Cole didn't flinch. "Relax, old man. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want what's mine." "You mean my life insurance?" "You don't get a penny." He smiled, slow and cruel. "You think it's about the money now? You humiliated people who don't forget. The video, the news, it made us all look stupid. I've got partners who want that fixed." The way he said partners made the night feel colder. Behind me, I heard the cabin door creak. Danny's voice trembling. "Grandpa." Cole's eyes flicked toward the sound, and that was all I needed. I fired a warning shot into the dirt by his feet. He jumped back, stumbling. "Jesus!" "Next one's not a warning," I growled. "Get off my land." For a second, I thought he'd test me, but then he smiled, like a man who wasn't done yet. "You can't stay hidden forever, Tom," he said. "Ghosts don't scare men like me." "Good," I said. "I'm not a ghost. I'm the man who came back to bury you properly." He backed toward his car, hands raised. "We'll talk again soon?" I doubt it. The tires spun gravel as he drove off into the dark. Danny ran out, eyes wide. "You could have hit him." "I could have," I said, lowering the rifle. But people like him? They're not worth the bullet. You let them hang themselves with their own rope. Inside, I called Sam again. He's real, I said, and he's stupid enough to show his face. Sam's voice hardened. Stay put. We'll put a tail on his plates. He'll slip up soon. 2 days later, he did. Cole tried to cross state lines with fake IDs and a suitcase full of cash. When the troopers stopped him, they found copies of forged medical files, mine among them. His fingerprints matched the ones from the forged documents at the insurance company. The man who'd tried to erase me was finally behind bars. When Sam called with the news, I didn't cheer. I just sat in silence. After a long pause, he said, "It's over, Tom." "Yeah," I said softly. "I guess it is." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. Not really. Because you can arrest a man, but you can't arrest the memories. You can't undo the fact that your own child thought your life was worth more dead than alive. That night, I walked out to the graveyard again, the real one, where they'd buried the empty coffin. The headstone still stood, slick with rain. Thomas Miller, 1952-2025. I brushed the leaves off and smiled. "Guess I'm not done haunting you yet," I muttered. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I carved a new word beneath my name, with my pocket knife shaking in the rain. Alive. And for the first time since all this began, I meant it. It took 3 months for the trial to begin. By then, the leaves had turned gold around the lake, and the cabin was warm again, alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Danny visited every weekend, helping me chop firewood, cooking eggs in the mornings the way Eleanor used to. He'd stopped flinching at every creak in the woods, and I'd stopped sleeping with the rifle beside the bed. But peace is fragile, especially when the people who broke you still carry your name. When the district attorney called to say Ruth wanted me at her sentencing, I almost said no. What could she possibly say that hadn't already been burned into my bones? But Danny begged me to go. "She's still my mom," he said quietly, "and you're still her dad." So I went. The courthouse smelled of dust and disinfectant, like it had been waiting years for something clean to happen there. Ruth sat at the defendant's table in a pale gray sweater. Her wrists looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes hollowed but steady. When she turned and saw me in the back row, she didn't cry. Just nodded, once, grateful or ashamed, I couldn't tell. The judge read through the sentence. 18 months in county custody, 3 years probation. Mark got 7 years for his part, plus restitution. The courtroom murmured. The gavel fell. It should have felt like justice. It didn't. When they led Ruth out, she asked to speak with me. The guard hesitated, then let her have a minute. She stopped in front of me, hands trembling, tears brimming, but refusing to fall. "Dad," she whispered, "you look healthy." "Healthier than my obituary said," I replied. That almost made her smile. Almost. "I wanted to tell you, I didn't just do it for money." "Then what for?" "For relief," she said, voice cracking. "You were always so strong, so proud. After Mom died, I felt like nothing I did was enough. You'd sit there in your silence, fixing things, never asking for help, never saying you were tired. I thought, if you were gone, maybe I could stop trying to live up to you." Her words hit harder than any lie she'd told before. I looked at her and saw not a criminal, not the woman who betrayed me, but the broken child who once stood crying at my workbench, afraid to admit she'd shattered her mother's favorite vase. The same fear, just older. I sighed. "You didn't have to bury me to be enough, Ruth. You already were. You just never saw it." She started crying then. Quiet, small sobs, like a confession whispered to the floor. The guard cleared his throat, but I raised a hand. "Give us 1 more minute." "Dad," she said between breaths, "can you ever forgive me?" I looked at her wrists, the chains glinting like guilt made solid. "Forgiveness isn't something I give," I said. "It's something you earn, one honest day at a time." She nodded. "Then I'll start today." When they led her away, I didn't follow. I just sat there, staring at the empty chairs she'd left behind, feeling the ache of everything we'd lost, and the faint heartbeat of something new beginning. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled of autumn rain. Danny was waiting by the truck. "How was it?" he asked. "Hard," I said, "but necessary." He climbed in beside me, quiet for a while, Then he said, "Mom wrote me again. She said she's taking classes inside. Wants to work in community programs when she gets out." I nodded. Good. People who fall that far need to climb for something. As we drove back to the cabin, the world felt both heavier and lighter. Justice had been done, but mercy was still on trial inside my chest. That night, I sat by the fire with my journal open, the same one Eleanor gave me 30 years ago when she said, "Write things down, Tom. So, you don't have to carry them all alone." The pages were nearly full now, my entire strange resurrection written in uneven lines. I wrote one last entry. They buried me once. My daughter wrote the words, but life, stubborn as it is, found a way back. I've learned something since. Death isn't the grave, it's being forgotten by the people you love. And forgiveness, maybe, is just memory choosing to stay alive. When I finished, I closed the book and laid it beside Eleanor's photo. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, still and endless. Danny was asleep in the spare room. I could hear his slow, steady breathing, the sound of future. I whispered into the quiet, "You can rest now, Ellie. I finally did what you would have wanted. I didn't let the darkness win." The fire crackled softly. I leaned back, the warmth against my face, the smell of smoke and pine filling the room. I thought about Ruth, about the long road she had ahead of her, about the first step she took today. I thought about Danny, about the way his hands had steadied when he helped me build the new porch railing that morning. Maybe redemption doesn't come from grand gestures. Maybe it comes from quiet mornings, from passing the hammer, from mending what's left. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, not because the past was fixed, but because it was finally finished. I reached for my mug, still half full of cold coffee, and smiled to myself. "Alive," I murmured, glancing at the word carved on my old headstone in memory. "And still kicking." The wind brushed through the trees outside, carrying the scent of wet earth and the faint echo of laughter, Eleanor's laughter, or maybe my own. And in that moment, I knew this simple truth. They buried a father, but what rose from that grave was something stronger, a man who had learned how to live again,